Hey guys, and welcome back to another Elestrals video. Today, we have actually an IRL deck profile. And I might be questioning why we're doing this is because I'm recording this on September 30th. And the day before this, September 29th, I actually went to an Elestrals tournament. Now, I will say, it was a small tournament. It was only 4 people, and one of them was me, but it was, at the very end of the day, a tournament, and I took second place with this out of 4 players. I will say, again, small tournament. It was 4 players, 2 rounds, and it was best of 1 rounds only. I do have a side deck that I am going to be showing you guys. However, it never came up, so I don't really know if I would take stuff out or put stuff in. But it has some additional cards that you might think I'm running in the main deck that I'm not. So if we get there, we get there. But this deck was super, super fun. I absolutely loved what this deck was able to accomplish. And this is slowly starting to become probably one of my favorite Elestrals decks ever. Like this deck is so much fun. And it just does so much really, really cool stuff. I don't even know if I said the name of the deck. It's Win Burn. So I played Win Burn, got second place. What was everybody else on? There was one person who was on Chronodial, but he was mostly playing just like a starter deck version of it. One person was playing Water. I don't think they were playing Water Nexus, just basically Water Stall with Lakagon. And the person that took first place was on Solar. Which, funny enough, I played them for first place. They ended up beating me, but they summoned 1 Solar Elestral the entire game. I'm still not convinced they were actually on Solar. They literally played Ashrabbit Beatdown with Elichick. Like, they summoned 2 Elichicks, 3 Ashrabbits, and 1 Jotora. That's all they summoned the entire clash. But without further ado, let's get straight on into the actual deck. So to start things off, we are running not 1, not 2, but 3 different copies of Toxiswarm. So Toxiswarm, let me move that back a bit. Toxiswarm is an incredible card for this deck. A lot of people are running this card at 2 copies right now. I really think this card is very good at 3, especially because of how I want to build decks. I want to build my decks with the understanding that I'm going into the tournament with a specific goal in mind. And that goal is going to be to play the deck that I want to play and play it as efficiently as possible. There are a lot of people that play, for example, Win Burn, but they run like 2 Toxiswarm, 2 Exaltair, maybe like 2 P-Gust, something like that. And the reason they do it is because they're dropping their Elestral count for additional runes, for some like interruptions and stuff like that. I did not want to do that. Reason being, I wanted to go in and make the game plan of Win Burn as efficient as possible. So I'm playing not only 3 copies of Toxiswarm, which, by the way, if you don't know what Toxiswarm does, just came out in Daybreak, so don't even blame you. When it receives 1 or more Wind Spirit, your opponent must expend 1. And you pair that with a card like Exaltair that we're also playing at 3 copies, that can Nexus a wind onto the Toxiswarm. The Toxiswarm will burn for 1 because it received, and then the Exaltair will burn for an additional 2. So you're getting a burn 3. And if you cast the Toxiswarm during that turn, you're actually burning your opponent for 4. So it's very powerful for that reason. However, Toxiswarm is not the only Receive Elestral we're playing. We're also playing 3 copies of P-Gust and 2 copies of Nemisail as our additional Receive Elestrals. These guys are absolutely insane. Nemisail is probably like MVP for me this tournament. I actually am tempted to bump it up to 3. I think 2 is fine, but 3 I could see, because just the ability to constantly be healing, make sure in the late game you're healing, your opponent isn't, is incredibly powerful. And if you summon this guy late game, typically your board is going to consist of, assuming you've been able to keep them around, Exaltair, Toxiswarm, and a Nemisail. You can just constantly use Exaltair to burn your opponent for 2, and then just swap that extra spirit onto the Nemisail and back and forth onto the Toxiswarm to every other turn you're burning your opponent for 3. And the other turn, you're burning your opponent for 2 and healing 2. Very powerful card, and I just kind of glance over it. P-Gust is also in here as a means to actually pop your opponent's runes. This is actually the game plan of the deck super, super early on. You are constantly trying to re-enchant your P-Gust super early on so that you can just blow up all your opponent's runes to get in for a big swing toward the end game where your opponent is rune deprived. So that's very, very powerful. P-Gust is incredible for that potential. So you always want to try to get a P-Gust into your opening hand, whether you're searching it off an AOS or you just grab the P-Gust normally. And then obviously the Nemi Sail. However, that's not the only, we still have one more remaining Wind Elestral that we are playing. That's going to be one copy of Sorlet. I'm playing this for a very similar reason as to what I was talking about when I was talking about Toxic Swarm, where I wanted to play cards. I wanted to play more cards that actually helped facilitate the strategy that I was going for, facilitate my game plan of actually going for win burn. And as a result, I didn't want to play additional copies of Sorlet because Sorlet is just it expends a wind to swap the position of an Elestral, and that does not help facilitate win burn. It just this card just allows you to get over a big guy, which is powerful, which is why I'm playing it at 1. But it's one of those cards where, like, I'll get it when I need it. When I don't need it, I'd rather just have the win burn going now. So that's sort of the idea I was going for. That's it for the Wind Elestrals. For the non-Wind Elestrals, we are playing 3 copies of Astrabbit. We are playing 3 copies of Elechick, and we're also playing 1 copy of Lavalith. I'll get into the Lavalith in just a moment. Let's quickly go in order. 3 copies of Astrabbit. I honestly kind of believe that if you are not running Astrabbit in your deck as of right now, you are doing something wrong, because with the limiting of not only resting on your laurels, but also Earthquake, Astrabbit is an incredible card now. Realistically, the only effective way to get rid of Astrabbit that like every deck will be playing is Boom Bat. And in this deck in particular, you can get over an Astrabbit with like a Sorlet or something. But Astrabbit is unbelievable in basically every deck now. I expect this card will likely get either banned or limited at some point in the near future. Definitely be on the lookout for that. But absolutely fantastic card. Elechick is in here. It can search AOS. Boom. Lavalith is in here. The reason I decided to play Lavalith, even though it's limited, is because of what I was talking about before with P-Gust. Your super early game strategy is to blow up all your opponent's runes to make it so that they're rune deprived. Lavalith facilitates that. The only issue with Lavalith is that if you are... My Lavalith was almost never online this entire tournament. And the main reason for that is that I was constantly in a position where I had like an A-list with like 1 or 2 on board, and I just kept casting my Elestrals to start getting that burn going. Lavalith, I was almost always up on board with Spirit Advantage. But Lavalith in positions where I will also say I went first every single time. I won every single die roll at this tournament. So I went first. Lavalith is a much better card going second as of right now, but it's still a fantastic card. I decided I wanted to facilitate the 2 Vipyro in my Spirit deck for it, just because the effect is still absolutely unbelievable. So for that reason, we were still on the Lavalith. You can choose to drop it. In fact, in future iterations, I'm tempted to drop it, but I'm currently still not there. If I were to drop it, I would either drop it for an Earthquake or a 3rd copy of Nemi Sail, I think. Maybe you could also throw in some additional counter runes, which we'll talk about when we get to the actual counter runes. But I did really, really enjoy Lavalith. It came up once, not for its effect, but I needed a big guy, and I top decked the Lavalith, so I just ascended it over one of my guys and was able to attack over it. So that actually did come up. The ability to get a big guy is actually prevalent, so I really do think since we are only running 1 copy of Sorlet, you need an additional big body, which is why I think Lavalith is very, very powerful in that position. But that's it for the Elestrals. Let's get into the runes. The runes are pretty self-explanatory, if I'm being entirely honest. We got 3 copies of Aeolus. We got 3 copies of Ambrosia. And then we also have the removal cards. We have 1 copy of Resting. And we're also playing 3 copies of Cryoblast. So this is all the removal I had. In previous iterations of this deck, I was basically running 3 Resting, 3 EQ. Obviously, I can't do that anymore, so why am I running this as the removal? Well, Resting is still a very, very good removal card. I would play Earthquake in this slot if I had the space in my Spirit deck, which I personally don't believe I do. I'll give you guys I'll just spoil something for you guys real quick. I am currently only playing 12 Wind Spirits, which I think 12 is like the minimum you need for this deck, because you will go through a lot of your Wind Spirits. So the ability to actually keep some of those Wind Spirits online is very, very prevalent, which is why I'm running Resting in this slot, because Resting is a what am I trying to say? Resting is a Omni. It's an Omni rune, so you can use it with any spirit type. So if you're running low on like Wind or whatever, you don't have to use a Wind. You can use like a Thunder or whatever. So I think that's very, very powerful, and it's the entire reason I am electing to run this card in the deck. And then also 3 copies of Cryoblast. You need an additional removal card in this deck, I feel like. I could have ran Boombat. I'll give you guys a little bit of a spoiler again. I am actually running Boombat in the side deck. However, I feel like Cryoblast is like fine. Cryoblast is still a good card. The unfortunate part about Cryoblast is that in a lot of my instances, it didn't really ever come up. Main reason being is because a lot of the games that I was playing against were with the problematic Elestrals. Astrabbit, which has 5 defense, and then there was like Jatoras. No, not Jatora. Jatagwas. There were some Jatagwas against the Chronodile player. He also had like Chronodile. First of all, he had Chronodile, not with its effects, so I could still target it. But yeah, it's a weird position. It's very, very strange to be in. I think Cryoblast is a card that should be considered for every single main deck as of right now, because you do need a little bit of removal, and the removal is now starting to become scarce. The 4 good removal cards in the game are Resting, EQ, Cryoblast, and Boombat. And of those, the 2 best in Resting and EQ just got limited. So it's not the best. So it's hard to really say. The only potential thing I could see myself doing, I don't think this is a good idea, is to play sort of Wind Burn alongside like a Thunder package, where like I play like a Zeus, and I play Mount Olympus and some Joltons to facilitate getting a Race to the Top online. I honestly don't believe that's the play, because I'm trying to play this deck pure, and if I'm throwing in a Thunder package, it's basically Thunder Wind control, and that's not the deck I wanted to play. So it's some things to note about the removal in the deck, but. God, I'm choking on my own saliva. Sorry about that. But now on to the counter runes. This is pretty standard stuff. We're playing 3 copies of Gorgons, 3 PTA, 3 Altar, and 2 Shield. Now, I will say about this rune lineup, which let me quickly just like place them out. Let me do this in the other way. Hang on. About this rune lineup, the one thing I'm dropping all the cards. The one thing I will say about this rune lineup is that I am obviously not on Tsunami, and the reason I'm not on Tsunami, there's 2 reasons that I'm not on Tsunami. The primary reason that I'm not on Tsunami is because Spirit Math is actually really, really bad. If I were to be on Tsunami, I should say, it would be really, really bad. I already said I'm running like the minimum number of Wind that I can like afford to get away with at 12. I'll just tell you guys you know what? Well, let's quickly talk about that. For the Spirit deck, we're running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 copies of Lycoris. We are running 1, 2, 3, 4 Zaptor, 1, 2 Flurmine, and 1, 2 Vipyro. So, with that, the only way that I'm able to really run Tsunami in this deck is by dropping 2 copies of Lycoris for 2 copies of Leviathan, which I do not want to do, because having less than 12 Wind Spirits to me is just a death sentence. I don't think that's the right play, so I decided not to put in Tsunami for that reason. However, the other thing to note is that we have Altura Stars in this deck, and Altura Stars in this deck in particular is essentially just Tsunami. Not only do you get to Nexus, which helps you with your board state, but you also get to change the position of an Elestral, and a lot of the time, just changing the position of one Elestral is enough to blank a battle step, which is what Tsunami was doing. So, for that reason, I elected not to play Tsunami in the main. I will say, again, I played it in the side, but this was the rune lineup. This was the entire main deck that we had. So that's it for the main deck. We already did talk about the Spirit deck. I can quickly just go over it real quick again. We had the 2 Vipyro for the Lawfulith, 2 Floor Mine. We ran this solely for the 3 copies of Cryoblast that we had. And then we were running 3 Astrabbit and 3 Elichix, so 4 copies of Zaptor. And then since that was it, the rest is just all wind. So that was sort of the idea with the deck. That was the Spirit math. And now, with that being said, let's quickly get into the side deck. I know I said that I didn't have a side deck at this tournament because it was a best of 1, not a best of 3. However, we can quickly actually still go ahead and talk about that. So I've already talked about a couple of these cards, so let's just quickly throw those ones right here out the window. 3 Tsunami, we were running that, and we are also running, as I mentioned previously, 3 copies of Boombat as well. So all of these cards are very powerful in their own right. And the reason why I elected the side deck them rather than main deck them, Tsunami, I've already talked about. However, I would have sided into Tsunami if I was playing against a non-water deck, I feel like. So, for that reason, if I was ever in that position, I probably would have just dropped Lawfulith, sided out the 2 Vipyros, and just thrown in the Tsunamis for that. However, I don't think I ever actually would have done that. Maybe in game 2, maybe in my second round, if we were having side decks in play, I would have. But my first round was up against Chronodile, so Tsunami was just dead. And that's another reason why I wanted the side deck Tsunami, was because if I was up against water, 3 of the cards in my deck were completely useless. So I was like, okay, I'm just might as well side deck it just in case I go up against water. I don't have a dead card for game 1. Boombats, I side decked because, yes, it's a fantastic form of removal, but I felt like I already had enough removal in the main deck. If I felt like I needed more removal, I was going to side in the 3 copies of Boombat just to get that additional removal. However, without that, I didn't really feel like it was necessary. With the amount of removal I had in the main deck, I didn't really think it was necessary to also main deck it. So that was it for that. In addition, we were also playing 2 copies of Verituka. So Verituka is actually a very, very interesting card. For anyone that does not know what this card says, this card says when this attacking Verituka enters... Is that what it says? Hang on, let me double check it. Yeah, when this attacking Verituka enters battle with an attack position Elestral that has equal or fewer enchanting spirits, you can suppress that Elestral and destroy it. If you do, this Verituka deals no damage in this battle. So, this can actually be another form of removal, and it's in wind, so it actually can very much come up. The downside, though, to playing Verituka in the main deck is that you're giving up 2 specific slots in your main deck for a card that can sometimes out something. Now, I will say, most of the time, this card will come up for you because most people are playing just 1-cost Elestrals. However, for those moments where you're playing 2 or 3-cost Elestrals, where your opponent's playing 2 or 3-cost Elestrals and they get them out, Verituka is basically a dead card. Now, you will also be able to say, well, why not just next onto it? That is fair, but again, that doesn't help advance your board state. It's just helpful for a little bit of removal. However, since it is searchable in the deck, I felt like it was at least a decent inclusion, so I felt like side decking it was the correct thing to do. However, another thing I do want to mention about this card is that this card specifically says when this attacking Verituka enters battle. So it itself has to declare the attack in order to get the effect off, not the other way around. If it is attacked, its effect will not activate, which is bad against some matchups because it is only a 3 attacker. That being said, I do feel like, again, it was at least good for the side deck, so I thought that was at least a good place to put it. The only other card that we actually played in the side deck, with the exception of Spirits, were 3 copies of Eddie. This was a last-second inclusion in the deck. And I threw in Eddie for a couple of reasons. One, I kind of expected a lot of people were going to be on Tsunamis, and to be entirely honest, I think maybe I saw Tsunami once, so maybe it wasn't like the best thing in the world. But also, Eddie is just, in its own right, a fantastic card. You know, Eddie is just what Eddie does. But another thing to note is that Eddie is essentially just an additional form of removal that is unaffected by one of the most prominent counter runes in the game. So I feel like just putting in 3 copies of Eddie, if I was going like second or even going first, whatever, wasn't actually all that bad of an idea. So I threw in the Eddies for that specific reason. And also, if I actually was able to side deck, this card would have come up a lot. Because, believe it or not, there was actually a person on Rockin' a Hard Place. They were playing some Kuribus stuff just to get they were playing Rockin' a Hard Place to get Kuribus out. It was the Chronodial player. So, honestly, if I just sided in Eddie and I cast it and they were like, oh, crap, now my Rockin' a Hard Place is offline because you might get a Kuribus. They don't know what I'm siding in, to be entirely honest. So, I will say this right now. I do not play Kuribus. But at the end of the day, Eddie is just removal. That's the main reason why I also played it. I played as much removal in the side deck as I could. Obviously, the Boom Bats, the Veritukas, and now the Eddies. But they're also just big threats that your opponent will eventually have to deal with. So that's another reason why I just elected to throw them in. That being said, that's 11 cards. What were the remaining 4? That was pretty simple. We just were playing 4 copies of Leviathan for the Eddies and for the Tsunamis. That was the entire side deck. You might be questioning why I elected to not throw in any additional copies of Zaptor for the additional copies of Boombat. Main reason behind that was because I needed... if I did that, I was going to have to drop something. And I guess technically speaking, I could drop like Verituka for 2 copies of Zaptor, but I didn't really think that was ever going to happen. I felt like if I ever got into a position where I was needing to bring in like 6 spirits, it was just not going to be a good idea. So I thought 4 was like the best because if I'm not going against water, I really do believe like bringing in Eddies and Tsunamis was actually going to be the correct play. And then I could just side out like Vipyros and maybe like the Fleur Mines, depending on what the matchup was, if I just wanted to go ahead and side out the Cryoblast as well. This was the entire deck. It was an absolute ton of fun, guys. Let me know if you want to see any more IRL deck profiles. Chances are I'm not going to do a ton of these anytime soon, just for the reason that basically I don't have a lot of these decks actually crafted in real life. I'm in the process of like proxying a bunch, but this was like the only deck that I actually currently possess every single card for. So that's the entire reason why I did that. Let me bring the let me pull that up. There we go. Now you can see me. Perfect. So I really hope you guys did enjoy. I absolutely expect myself to be playing this deck a ton once Elestrals Clash actually comes out. Hopefully that will actually... Let me bring the mic closer a bit. Hopefully that does actually end up being a very, very good game. Very much hopeful for that. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, make sure to slap the like button and subscribe for more. Hope to see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.